В якості другої презентації
And I am very happy to present our colleague, Madam Lesya and Mr. Oleksandr. They cooperate as educators, philosophers, participants of different events.
Досвід виявляється. Власне, цього разу вони
Now they propose something very refreshing, Audiolessons. And we are very interested who listens to these lessons and how it all works. Thank you very much for the introduction. In the program, you have seen our titles, and Oleksandr and I are working with one school, but we like to be open, and if you really want to teach, it's not enough to stay still. For me, the 27th of January is always a day when I must participate in the current roundtable. And this idea of engagement and commemorating important dates, this is really important. Our project, we are presenting, actually it was quite spontaneous, because best ideas are spontaneous, but also wise people think alike. During COVID-19 pandemic and post-COVID invasion, we saw the importance of education in order to cover educational losses. Providing textbooks is not enough. There must be other sources of information, state project, all Ukrainian school online, but to produce these video lessons, actually this is very expensive. And the alternative to this project is the project Study by Your Ears. And the idea of the project named Study by Your Ears is the following. You have an equipment on your head, and our students also can listen to the educational material. The content is very interesting. The methodology of the project is very good, and in terms of this course, Study by Your Ears, we had audio lessons dedicated to different subjects. And in this framework, we could speak on Holocaust.
I managed at some point to fight for the topic, to present the topic about Babyn Yar, and I'm fan of the book of Evgeny Kuznetsov about the Babyn Yar, because the plot is really nice, and you can work with this text with students. You can work with the texts that were deleted from this edition and to use it during the classes. I wanted to talk about Babyn Yar and how a 13-year-old perceived the events when the war came to 13 years old, and it's not clear what attitude to have it. So I included this topic, and after that Sasha re-emerged, and then he will explain you how this one lesson expanded. Thank you, Lesya. I'm really grateful to the management of the project, Learn with Your Ears. And after this lesson, I understood that there are a lot of themes that can be included in the process of educational process for kids, for them to perceive the topic easily. And we included these texts. We added five more records. For me, it was important to show this topic in wide perception, and then firstly to talk about it in general, and then in some particulars about like Nazism, about the specifics of Holocaust in Ukraine, to show the map of the death camps, about and not to show it from the point of view of victims, but also about people who were saving Jews during those times, and to make a comparison analysis in Ukraine and in Europe. All those lessons are included in this agenda. You can listen to them on Spotify or different platforms, and they can be downloaded to listen them offline. We were really surprised that by the number, because we made these records in 2024, and when we asked for the stats, we saw that there are more than 2,000. They were listened to more than 2,000 times already, and I was like really surprised by that. And if we are talking about it in the context of our times, it was like really shocking that people are interested in this topic. How can we include those lessons into the history lessons in schools? Of course, we can listen those lessons during the classes. Normally, one audio lesson lasts for 16 minutes. You can listen them in parts or at a whole. Of course, there is space for the discussion, or of course, you can include some definitions, some logical connections. Of course, they can be used for homework. You can use it like partly discuss it in class and then gives it for homework to work on this topic at home. Or you can do it as like advanced studying, like to pre-listen the text and then after discuss it. Of course, there are also some links for the further information to learn about some topic in depth. When we're talking about one lesson, I would like to explain how we were gathering and divided the material for this podcast. We wanted to be very usable for teachers and for students as well. On this slide, you can see the short, like a brief timeline of what time I start to talk. Unfortunately, it's not me who is talking, of course, because I could not speak when we were making the recording, but the text is mine. And so I think you can hear me throughout this text. But you can see in this podcast that you can include some links for additional information. If kids are interested in some topic, they can follow several links to find more information in depth. What about podcasts? We offer for kids to make a test how well they got the lesson, and so those tests, that text for the text is included in the podcast. And it's very easy to understand what topics were perceived well, understood, which are not, and it could give us a sign which topic is harder to perceive. For instance, there is one question where the prisoners of war were held, because sometimes kids can hear some names of the places, but it's hard for them to remember well. Or, for instance, on importance of the several dates, like for how long did it take for Germans to reach Kyiv, and it's very well correlated of how much time Jews had to escape. When another question, who were not executed in Baben Yar, and after even kids had visited exhibition, and then they listened to podcast, and then it's very hard for them to answer this question, because it's very hard for them to understand that not only Jews were the victims in Baben Yar. And then you can include the topic of inclusiveness in this lesson, because and to include the statements that all of us should communicate better, and to preserve the dignity of each victim of the Holocaust. And last question is about why we spell Baben Yar in breaks, because the same situation as had happened in Baben Yar was held not only here in Kyiv, but those ravines were all over Ukraine. And for kids it's very important to hear too, and for the teachers it's a very good brief how to conduct the lessons on such topic, because sometimes those ravines, those places of the execution are not that popular, but it's very important to include those too, especially if the class, like if the teacher work in the city where there are some places of the execution nearby, for the children to perceive and to understand the depths of the tragedy. I like to include the example of my own city. It's city Staritske. According to the records of 1930, there were 20% of the whole population were Jews, and only 12 people survived. So the city has lost 1/5 of its population. Where did they go? What heritage have they left? Except of ruined houses. And this audio lesson, when I was working on it, I included this context of exploring the environment, and then to go into the history of your local community, local city in depth, to understand who you are and how to live with that. Because when you understand that it's not some remote history of some unknown Jews, but it's the history of your neighbors, it sounds differently, and it helps to understand this event in depth, and to commemorate it in a more dignified way, because I think this is one of the main tasks for our historians, except for the critical thinking. Those are the two poles that we're holding to. What else can we do with these lessons more? We have this more complex approach in our school. Like interdisciplinary approach. This list that you can see, of course, is not full. You can work in different ways with our recordings. We can talk about the factors that led to Holocaust. You can use for those topics first and the second record. You can. This is a topic you can discuss after listening of this podcast, and to explore more wider contexts. After the listening of this podcast, you can create like roundtable or some discussion to include some important questions to promote the discussion, and to understand if children understood the topic in depth. What questions we can include? For instance, what was the point of no return for the Holocaust to happen? Like this type of question and other questions. So that's when we create the possibility for the students to understand the events, to work in group, to make a discussion, to create speeches, and this is very important. Also informational digital competences is included. We can promote the informational digital competence in our students with the help of our podcast, because you can provide your students with the projects. They can create individual projects, like video projects. They can create a timeline of the events. They can make this project about Babyn Yar, about the environment of Babyn Yar, what was there, what there is now, about the Holocaust and the modern world, about the death camps. So all those projects, your students can create all those projects. Also, what my students really enjoy, they like to work with digital constructors, for instance, to create like a timeline of the key events that were happening during the Holocaust. For instance, I asked them to describe some event, and after that, after creating this timeline, I try to include them into the discussion, to make some speech about it, and it creates a good discussion in the class. Another very helpful tool is to create the interactive map using and this there are some resources like think.com or padlet.com, where on the actual map of Ukraine you can put some points and information about the key locations of mass execution of Jews in the territory of Ukraine that Lesya already mentioned. This information can be picked up from the audio lessons that we provide, or they can use some additional information, especially if it concerns the location from where their parents or grandparents come from. And also, of course, we can include not only the territory of Ukraine, but all over the world, just to pin the key places. For instance, Berlin, Warsaw, different places that are connected to the history of the Holocaust. Kids like to play with those constructors, with those platforms. I didn't use them yet during my lessons, but I think when we will reach this topic, I will use them for sure. Now, when we are started to use Versal system, we were using these interactive maps during other topics, when we were learning other topics, and it was very successful because with the help of this tool we create the competency of orientation in space and time, and I think this is a very important competence. Of course, I present now the list of tools that we use, and of course it's not full list, and I would like to hear from you, so please listen to our podcast, understand them, and please we will wait for some critique from you. Dear colleagues, we have not too much time, but maybe you have already used some of those tools, and maybe you have some comments or questions or anything to add to the presentation.
Секундочку.
How long what is the timeline of the podcast? How long is it? So it's about 16-18 minutes. Mine is a little bit different. It's a little bit longer, but because it was the first one, it's a bit more than 20 minutes. But it is divided on the content. It consists from several parts, and during the lesson there are some pauses where you can make some discussions.
So you can listen one chapter, work with it, and listen to the next one afterwards. From the point of view of methodology, this is quite well done.
Доброго дня. Алла Грушецька, Музей історії України у Другій світовій
Alla
війні.
Grushevska Museum of the History of Ukraine in the Second World War. What is the age of your listeners, and are there any lessons for the kids that don't have in their school curriculum this topic? In fact, these lessons were done in compliance with the curriculum from the ministry, the 10th and 11th grade, but every teacher, for example, the first grade of study, teacher can go there, see it. We communicate adequately, and I think that the contact for the 5th grade of education is also fine. And you really can broaden your target audience. But according to the coordinator of the project, Miss Irina, audio lessons for kids are listened by adults. Imagine that since we were studying at school, everything has changed, and grown-ups are interested in the history of Ukraine, and they listen to these lessons. That's why we left some useful links for the adults in terms of this course.
Дякую.
Всі навчаються разом.
Я хотіла спитати,
I
враховуючи
would like to ask the following, considering that modern children are considered to be attached to visual materials. What is the feedback? Did you get some questions about where are the pictures, and are you planning to add some pictures?
Ми ще ці саме уроки не практикували у викладанні.
We haven't been practicing these exact lessons, but speaking of other lessons in terms of the project, at first children had some difficulties, but for the second time I paid attention that the listeners start to listen with better concentration. For example, the policy of our school is the following: no gadgets. They don't have smartphones. And before listening to the lesson, our children have a very definite task. Think on this or that question. Find out this or that hook, so to say. So they are concentrated before listening.
Чим частіше ти його використовуєш і дозовано,
The more frequently you use this tool, the better you feel with it.
ну, грубо кажучи, вирубались після прослуховування. У мене не було.
There were no cases when children just lost interest after listening. I also produced other lessons, and we had the following case. Children say that, for example, if you give the task, the homework, or listen audio lesson, they are more interested in audio lesson because when it is just about listening, they can listen to it on the way home. They don't need monitor or a screen or a book. I did my best to produce my lessons vigorous, and my students say that, Madam Lesya, we listen to you 30 minutes.
Але в нас таке було враження, що ми
But we were under the impression that it took us 2 minutes to listen to your podcast. We felt 30 minutes like 2 minutes.
Коли ти починаєш слухати, ти концентруєшся на матеріалі, ти не
I agree with my colleague that when you concentrate, you are just going deep into it.
Дякую дуже, колеги. Давайте ще раз подякуємо.
Спасибі.
Thank you so much.